turn to the Japanese today. We're all against dropping nuclear weapons on Japan today. We're all for Nelson Mandela today. But that's too easy. So the reason I raise those historic examples is, what are we missing that we take for granted, that we just take as part of the air we breathe? What are we missing? I'll just give you two examples. One, 30 years from now, when your granddaughter says to you, were you in Grant Park, Chicago, 2008, November 4th? You can say yes, because nobody will know. You can even say you were at the inauguration. But the other thing she might ask you is, she might say, were you around when the first African-American president was elected? And if things work out well, you can say, yes, I was, with a certain amount of pride. And I even knocked on doors, and I did this and did that. And then she might say, is it true that it cost him $750 million to be elected? And you call that democracy? And you'll say, really? I don't remember that part. Yeah, she'll say, yeah, you guys thought that was democracy? You guys were out of your mind. And you might say feebly, he raised it on the internet. She'll say, big fucking deal. So what? I'm just saying, I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying that it's the kind of thing that you could imagine. Or your granddaughter will say, so you went to, the Claremont College and colleges and whatnot, and when you went to college, there were 2.3 or 4 million of your fellow citizens in prison. And you'll say, yeah, I think that's true. We were against that and stuff. And there was one just miles from your campus. Do you know that? Or with my students, I often tell them, 1 mile from our campus in Chicago, there are 18,000 black men caged 1 mile from our campus. And it's a gulag, and nobody sees it, and it's invisible. And if I said to you, okay, I'm saying that to you, 18,000 black men in a cage. And you know it, but it kind of makes sense, and it's kind of the world we live in, isn't it? What if I said 18,000 Jewish women are locked up over there? You'd say, no, possibly, no way. What they do? Well, it's just the way, what we get acclimated to, what we assume, what we take for granted, right? The death penalty, and so on and so on. So all I'm saying is the world we're living in is not finished any more than the world of 1840 was finished. And we are living in history, and we are works in progress. And what we do or don't do, what we notice or don't notice, has a lot to do with what the outcome of not only this administration, but our lives are going to amount to. Now, it's very easy to close your eyes or to make the assumption that being conventional is the same as being moral or being ethical. Like if I said to you, were you an ethical person today? Yeah, I think so. What's the proof? I didn't kill anybody. Oh, good for you. That's great. Another day without killing anybody. I'm pleased. But really, what did you do affirmatively to name the problems in the world and to do something about them? And this takes me to another example, more contemporary. Have some of you seen the film Central Station? It's a film from Brazil. Go and get it on Netflix immediately. Write it down. I'm just kidding. I'm a professor, so I sometimes say write it down, but ignore me. When I say that, just ignore me. Just like you ignore your professors. Yeah, write it down. Central Station. It's a story, it takes place in Brazil. It was up for an Academy Award a decade ago. And it's a retired teacher who writes letters for illiterates in the Central Station of Rio de Janeiro. And Rio is like Southern California, very complicated, hard to get around. And one day a guy who she knows from the Central Station comes to her and says, Dora, I'd like you to do a job for me. I want you to go to this address on the far side of Rio, pick up a 9-year-old boy, deliver him to this address. It'll take you most of the day, and I'll meet you there and give you $1,000. The boy is going to be adopted by a rich American couple. So Dora does the job, gets the $1,000, and on her way home, she stops and buys a television. She's sitting in her humble apartment watching the TV when a neighbor comes over and asks about the TV, and Dora tells her the story. And the neighbor says to her, Dora, are you insane? Don't you pay any attention to the world? Don't you read the papers? Dora says, what do you mean? She says, that boy wasn't adopted. No American couple adopts a 9-year-old. He was sold into the market for organs. He's probably already been killed, and his organs harvested for this lucrative international organ donor market. Now that's all in the first 20 minutes. So what does Dora do? Dora spends the rest of the film trying to retrace her steps to find the boy to save his life. And we who have the money and live in the West and consume a movie like that, we expect nothing less. We expect her to do exactly that. But what sometimes happens when you see a film like that is you realize that you also are Dora. You're also implicated. You also have, in some sense, a guilty conscience. You also, if you're paying attention, if your neighbor comes to you and says, "Aren't you watching?" then you notice, and then you say, "Oh my God," and then you have to retrace your steps and ask yourself, how do I save the boy? How do I do the right thing? Suddenly I'm thinking about my mother, my beloved mother who died maybe a decade ago, and maybe 15 years ago I was taking care of her, and she had broken her ankle, and she asked me, quite innocently, she knows better, but occasionally she would ask me something that she shouldn't ask me, and she asked me, what is this thing I've heard of called global warming? And I gave her a very mild, believe me, very watered down, didn't want to scare the shit out of the old ladies. I was like calm, and she looked at me very cold, very, chill, and she said to me, "Well, I'm sorry I asked." Well, exactly, because you asked, now you heard, and because you heard, now you feel you have to do something, and you have to change your life, and you don't want to change your life. That's the beauty of privilege. The beauty of privilege is that it anesthetizes you to the world. And so the final example, the wonderful novel by José Saramago, the Nobel laureate from Portugal. The novel is called Blindness. Write it down. Just kidding. Don't write it down. Blindness is the story. It begins in a modern city, unnamed, and a man is in a traffic jam. And in the first paragraph, he suddenly goes blind, and all hell breaks loose around him. Somebody helps him from his car and then steals his car. He makes his way home with the assistance of someone in the crowd, and his wife takes him to a clinic, and everyone in the clinic has mysteriously gone blind. And the doctors and the authorities don't know what to do with them, so they quarantine them behind a barricade, in an abandoned hospital. And the guards are guarding them, and it's a nasty, awful situation. It gets worse and worse as more and more people go blind, and eventually the guards go blind. And eventually, layer after layer, the entire world goes blind. And in their blindness, people form themselves into gangs, and they prey on one another, and they fight over shelter, they fight over food, they hoard food, they steal from one another. Gangs of men rape gangs of women. And as it sinks into a deeper and deeper and darker dystopia, you don't know how it can get any worse. And at the moment when they're at the bottom rung of the ladder, the first guy's sight comes back, and he blinks his eyes on again. And then the next person, and the next person, and suddenly everyone can again see. And they embrace one another, but awkwardly, because of what they've just done to one another. And somebody cries out, "Why did we go blind, and why can we now see?" And at that point the narrator says, perhaps we didn't go blind. Perhaps we were blind. Blind people who could see, seeing people who were blind. And that is very much the message of Central Station. We are all of us in the modern world seeing people who are blind. Who doesn't know about the catastrophe of AIDS in Southern Africa? Who doesn't know? We all know. Who doesn't know that we were lied into Iraq, and that the lie that takes us into Pakistan is unfolding before us? Who doesn't know about the environmental catastrophe that lies just ahead? We know, and yet we're blind. And so the charge to all of us is, open our eyes, open your eyes, pay attention. And when you pay attention, you then have to do something. And the doing something is often uncomfortable. And the problem, of course, with doing something is there's no perfect thing to do. Sometimes my students, when I get passionate in this direction, will say to me, "I can't do everything." And my response is, can you do anything? Can you do anything? Because anything is all you have to do. You don't have to do everything. Nobody wants you to die or stop eating or anything like that. But you have to do something. I'm reminded very quickly